It is a monumental day for college sports as the House Settlement Agreement has been approved. And we're going to talk about it live on this edition of Couz's Corner. It's a landmark moment in college athletics, and it unfolded as U.S. District Judge Claudia Wilkin granted final approval to the House versus NCAA settlement. This settlement is a monumental $2.8 billion agreement that fundamentally reshapes the landscape of college sports. It resolves three antitrust lawsuits all at once: the House versus NCAA, Hubbard versus NCAA, and Carter versus NCAA. And it marks the end of the NCAA century-long amateurism model and ushers in a system where schools can directly pay athletes for the first time. We're going to take a deep dive into what this settlement entails, its implications, and what lies ahead for college sports. And we're going to do that right after this word from one of our channel sponsors. Since 1931, the attorneys at Katz, Cantor, Stonestreet, and Buckner have been the voice for victims who have suffered serious injury or death. They have a fierce passion for truth and justice and a sincere compassion for those who have been wronged by others. Whether you have been in a car accident or fighting with an insurance company, or you or a loved one has suffered serious injury or death due to medical negligence, we will ensure your voice is heard loud and clear. Katz, Cantor, Stonestreet, and Buckner will ensure there is justice for all West Virginians, because we are your lawyer, your voice. Visit us at yourlawyeryourvoice.com. What is up, and welcome into this live edition of Couz's Corner, where we're going to go over the details of the House Settlement Agreement, talk about what it means. We'll also go over a statement from Rim Baker. This is not going to be a long show because West Virginia is in the middle of playing a super regional in baseball, and I want to watch it. So this is going, and I'm sure a lot of you do too. A lot of you probably aren't even watching this live. You're catching the replay. But let's go ahead and go over the details of this House Settlement Agreement for those of you who might be wondering exactly what this means. So what is the House versus NCAA settlement? The House versus NCAA case was initiated in 2020 by former Arizona State swimmer Grant House and former TCU basketball player Sedona Prince. It challenged the NCAA's restrictions on athletes' ability to earn from their name, image, and likeness and share its media revenue. And we all know that media revenue has been massive, right? We're talking now into the billions for some of these conferences and tens of millions for the schools. Combined with two other antitrust lawsuits, the case argued the NCAA rules unfairly limited athletes' earning potential, violating federal antitrust laws. After years of litigation, the NCAA and the Power 5 conferences, which as we know is now the Power 4, the ACC, Big 10, Big 12, Pac-12, and SEC agreed to settle, avoiding a potential $20 billion liability if the case had gone to trial. Now, the Pac-12 schools are still on the hook for this, even though the Pac-12 conference, it still exists, but it's with different schools now. Any school who was in the Pac-12 conference when this settlement was agreed to is on the hook for this. That includes Oregon State and Washington State. So it'll be interesting to see how they're able to navigate this. I have my doubts whether or not Oregon State and Washington State will be able to be to go to the full amount of the revenue sharing because schools are not required to give the full amount. But they can't go over that amount. It's a cap. Let's go ahead and go over the details. It says there's two primary components. There's back pay damages, where the NCAA and its conferences will pay $2.78 billion over 10 years to compensate Division I athletes who completed all the way back to approximately 8 years ago. So it goes all the way, basically athletes who played all the way back to 2016 up through 2024 will now get back pay because it goes all the way back as far as the statute of limitations allow, basically. Since they weren't able to capitalize on NIL back then, they're getting back pay. He says approximately 75% of this fund is expected to go to football players, 20% to men's and women's basketball players, and 5% to other athletes. Power 5 football and basketball players could potentially receive an average of $135,000 each. So revenue sharing model says it's starting July 1, 2025. Schools are going to start being able to pay their student athletes directly from their revenue. Schools can opt into a revenue sharing plan. They can distribute up to $20.5 million annually to athletes in the 25-26 season. So it begins this season, this coming football season. It starts. It's calculated as 22% of the average Power 5 school's media ticket, and sponsorship revenue. This cap is expected to grow by at least 4% annually. It's expected to reach $32.9 million by the end of the 10-year agreement. Now, the 22%, like I said, is the average of Power 5 schools' media. So it's not based on individual. So, for example, it's not 22%. Alabama doesn't pay 22% of theirs, and West Virginia pay 22% of theirs. No, it's based on the average across all Power 5 schools. That's where the 20.5 number came from. So every school, no school in the Power 5 can go above the 20.5 million in revenue sharing. Now, there is additional NIL money that can be paid out outside of that, which we'll get to in just a minute. Here are the key changes and features of the settlement, okay? Which the NIL piece will fall into this. Direct payment to athletes. For the first time, schools can pay athletes directly for their name, image, and likeness. This is a move away from the previous model where athletes could only earn through third-party deals or donor-funded collectives. This shift effectively ends the NCAA's traditional amateurism framework, aligning college sports closer to a professional model. There will also be roster limits and scholarships changes. The settlement replaces scholarship limits with roster caps, allowing schools to offer scholarships to all rostered players. However, concerns about roster limits potentially cutting 5,000 athletes across NCAA sports prompted Judge Wilkin to delay final approval until a grandfather clause was added, ensuring current athletes and those promised roster spots for 25-26 are protected. So players that were cut off of their teams or were going to be cut will be grandfathered into this. And schools can choose not to cut those players, or the players that were cut can go to their next school and be grandfathered in there. So any player who's on the roster now does not have to be cut, which means the roster limit, which will be 105 for football, teams can go over that for this year as long as they I don't know if they can go over the number, but the players that are currently on the roster don't have to be cut. That's the key. I want to be clear there. All right. And by the way, and every person on your roster can get a scholarship. Now, it doesn't mean you have to give a scholarship to those players, but you can. So schools that are able to give out 105 scholarships, it may sound like to some that there's an advantage there, but it's actually not, because that I think it's up to $2.5 million of your additional scholarship money counts toward the $20.5 million cap. So that cap includes scholarship money. Ren Baker actually talked about that on my show last summer when he was on, and I was able to ask him about this. So if a football team decides to give 20 additional scholarships, the money for those scholarships goes against that $20.5 million cap, which is less money you would have to pay for NIL. So a lot of schools may choose to keep some walk-ons on the roster. Now, it's my understanding, and I'm sure West Virginia will come out with something about this later, but it's my understanding that what West Virginia is planning to do is they're going to have their normal 85 scholarship number, and then those players will also be able to participate in the revenue sharing. The additional 20 players on the roster from 85 to 105 won't necessarily get a quote-unquote scholarship, but they will be given enough rev share money to pay for their tuition and their room and board, and basically it would equal what they were making on a scholarship. So West Virginia, even though they technically won't have 105 scholarship players, those players will not be required to pay for their schooling. And I think that's a pretty smart move. Now, that's a little less money they'll have to give maybe to those, quote, scholarship players who are normally your better players, but they're also taking care of the guys on the back end of the roster, which I think is a good thing. There's going to be a new enforcement structure. It says a new body, the College Sports Commission, will oversee the settlement's terms, including a clearinghouse called NIL Go. This clearinghouse will vet third-party NIL deals over $600 for fair market value. This aims to curb the outrageous amounts being paid out to players by boosters in agreements disguised as NIL deals. The enforcement will be handled by an arbitration process rather than NCAA. So basically, any company who wants to do an NIL deal with a player that's over $600, that deal has to be approved by this clearinghouse. And they will look at it and say, okay, is this deal above and beyond what it should be? Is it above market value for what an endorsement deal like this should cost? Is this company, so to speak, basically giving this school an unfair advantage by giving this player an astronomical amount that's over and above market value for this deal? Now, this is which I'll touch on this later, but this is one of the parts of this agreement that could face legal challenges, because a lot of people still look at this as an antitrust issue because you shouldn't be able to cap someone's earning potential. So I expect there will be more lawsuits to come, even with this House settlement, but at least this is a start. And maybe this will entice Congress, people like Ted Cruz, Cory Booker, and others, to pass some kind of bill that they can enact to codify this thing. All right. The back pay distribution, the $2.8 billion in damages is expected to be paid out within 45 days of finalization. Athletes had until January 31st of 25 to file claims or opt out, with only about 3,400 of nearly 390,000 eligible athletes opting out, indicating broad acceptance. What are the implications for college sports? The settlement represents a seismic shift, but it's not without complexities and potential challenges, as I mentioned. The financial impact on schools, while Power 5 schools, particularly in the SEC and Big Ten, are expected to opt into revenue sharing to remain competitive, smaller programs may struggle to allocate $20.5 million annually without cutting non-revenue sports or other expenses. It's definitely a concern. This could widen the gap between wealthy and less funded programs. And, as a fan of West Virginia, I'm concerned about this. What will West Virginia be able to do to pay that $20.5 million? I mean, their entire athletic budget is only like $106 million. And that was before having to pay out this 20.5. They're having to so take that 20.5 million off the top. That leaves them down to what? 80 million? It's not enough. So they're going to have to figure out ways to increase their revenue and come up with new revenue streams, which I have faith that Ren Baker can do that. And I will actually touch on, he put out a statement just a few minutes before I started the show, and I will get to that in a minute. The Title IX concerns. This is another concern. It says the settlement does not explicitly address how revenue sharing complies with Title IX, which requires equitable treatment of male and female athletes. Since football and men's basketball generate most revenue, schools may allocate funds disproportionately, potentially sparking lawsuits if female athletes feel shortchanged. What's that mean? Well, if Title IX becomes an issue, schools may have to start cutting some of their male sports. They're male sports that aren't men's basketball or football, right? They might have to cut men's cross country or golf or, I'm just throwing out random sports, but they might have to cut some of those in order to pay their female athletes more. So that is a risk here. All right, sorry about that. Had to clear my throat. Anyway, let's keep going. And by the way, I'm getting this info from the article I did over at my site, wvsportschat.com. Employment status unresolved. The settlement avoids addressing whether athletes are employees, a contentious issue. College sports leaders oppose employee status to avoid unionization, but ongoing cases like those involving Dartmouth's basketball team suggest this debate will persist. So this isn't the end of the conversation about employment status for student athletes, which, to be honest with you, in my opinion, may be the only way to actually solve everybody's concerns. If the student athletes are allowed to sit down and collectively bargain with the schools, with the athletic departments, to come up with contracts. Now, there are going to be contracts now, but it might be hard to make them binding without the collective bargaining piece. So we'll see where that goes. NIL regulation, there'll be a new clearinghouse that aims to regulate third-party NIL deals, but critics, including the Department of Justice, argue the revenue sharing cap and restrictions on collectives may still violate antitrust laws by limiting athletes' earning potential. I touched on that earlier. So what's next? With the final approval secured, schools can begin direct payments on July 1st, 2025, coinciding with the 25-26 academic year. The College Sports Commission, supported by firms like Deloitte and LBI, will monitor compliance using data to ensure NIL deals reflect fair market value. However, the settlement doesn't resolve all issues. Mentioned ongoing litigation. There are nearly 350 athletes who opted out. And there are new lawsuits, like one filed by former Mississippi State running back Kylan Hill, who have already challenged the settlement terms. Title IX and antitrust concerns may also prompt further legal battles. You have state laws, states like Georgia and Virginia, who have passed laws that sometimes may conflict with the terms of this settlement agreement. What happens there? Even the state of West Virginia has some laws that I'm a little curious what's going to happen there. He says the NCAA will continue to lobby Congress for federal NIL legislation and an antitrust exemption to stabilize the industry. We're seeing this could lead to a cultural shift. It's a move toward a professional model, which raises questions about the future of non-revenue sports, walk-on opportunities, and the balance between academics and athletics. Schools are already hiring general managers, a practice borrowed from professional sports, signaling a broader cultural shift. So in conclusion, the House versus NCAA settlement is a watershed moment, dismantling the NCAA's amateurism model and paving the way for athletes to share in the billions generated by college sports. While it offers significant financial benefits, $2.8 billion in back pay and over $20 billion in future revenue sharing, it also introduces new complexities, from roster management to legal uncertainties. As NCAA President Charlie Baker noted, this settlement is a, quote, pathway to begin stabilizing college sports, end quote. Yet, with unresolved issues like Title IX, athlete employment status, and potential lawsuits looming, the journey to a sustainable future for college athletics is far from over. Fans, athletes, and administrators alike will be watching closely as this new era unfolds. Now, let's go ahead and share what West Virginia released today as far as their announcements, or their announcement on this. This is from over at the WVU Sports website and their social media platforms, from VP and Director of Athletics Ren Baker. He says, with the approval of the House settlement, a new era of college athletics is here. Schools can now share revenue directly with student athletes with oversight from the newly established College Sports Commission. West Virginia University Athletics has been working and planning for this day for a long time to best position our department for future long-term success. While we will have further updates soon, I want to let Mountaineer Nation know that our tradition and place on the national stage is at the forefront of our decision-making process. We will fully participate in revenue sharing as the House settlement offers stability, fairness, and opportunity under the guidance of the College Sports Commission. It's a new day in college athletics, and WVU will be strategically positioned to continue competing at the highest levels. Let's go. Signed, Ren Baker. So, Ren Baker plans for West Virginia to be competitive. He plans for West Virginia to be all in on this revenue sharing. Now, where the money's going to come from, I'm assuming he has a plan. He said they've been planning for a long time. I can't wait to see what his plans are, what the athletic department's plans are to bring in additional revenue to help West Virginia compete in this new landscape. Now, I think this is a good thing. Teams like West Virginia and even most of their peers in the Big 12, with a couple of exceptions, maybe Texas Tech and BYU are exceptions, but for the most part, most of the schools in the Big 12 and even most in the ACC are playing on a somewhat level playing field. But the problem is they're trying to compete with the SEC and the Big 10 for national championships in all sports. And when their TV deals and their revenue is, double in some cases, or if not more than what yours is, that's tough to do. But by putting this cap, this $20.5 million cap, assuming it holds up legally, it's going to help schools like West Virginia, to me, compete. Now, obviously, the outside NIL deals is another piece of this. Yes, they will still be able to do that, and some of these schools will have more opportunity to do that because they are in bigger markets. There's a lot more NIL opportunities for players in larger markets. But still, it puts some sort of guardrails around it. It puts some sort of competitive balance around it. Again, assuming this gets codified and assuming that the legal challenges don't kill it. That's my biggest concern is the legal challenges. Will it kill it? And hopefully this will lead to federal legislation, which will help solidify this even more and make these rules, or at least some of them, long-term. the ones that make the most sense. Anyway, let's see if we got any comments in here. I know this, again, I know a lot of Mountaineer fans are watching the baseball game, so I'm going to keep this short. Tosh Miller in the house, got Earth Ether in the house. Sun Devil ASU says Oregon State might be able to, Washington State will not. Great comment. Yeah, Oregon State seems to be Washington State's been having some financial struggles. Oregon State seems to have their house in order financially, so we'll see how that goes. Sasquatch 304 in the house. We have Kim Jamondo in the house. Says, could West Virginia record in football in 25? I don't know yet. I'm looking forward to doing a game-by-game breakdown, but so we'll see where I land on that. But I'm going to say it's going to be somewhere probably in the 6 to 8 win range. Stormy Cyclone says, survive any way possible till next media deal. John Christophic says, hi, Couz. Got J-Rod in the house. And Locked On West Virginia. I am getting ready to get off here and watch it right now, brother. But I had some folks who wanted me to explain this house settlement, and I didn't want to. And I thought the quickest way to do it would be to jump on here and do a live show real quick. Then I can watch the game when I'm done. So that's the plan. So anyway, thanks to you all for tuning into this. If you're watching this on the replay, please hit the thumbs up button. Please subscribe to the channel. Please share it with your family and friends. Please go check out the new website, wvsportschat.com. Myself, Jonathan Martin, Shauna Rose, we're trying to build this sucker, so go support what we're doing over there, the written side of the house at Couz's Corner. Thank you all again. Hope the rest of your day's top shelf. God bless, and Q Country Roads.